I was talking to Yuri and Kevin on the plane here last night, and we're talking. I'm doing a product that's way off in the future. I'm gonna do a verbal game product, where it's gonna be like everything about like how to do the verbal side of game. And they're asking like what would be the difference between that and like the text game product I'm doing now, and what's gonna be included. And we're talking about what makes my game work, what makes it not work, that sort of thing. And the big thing that I do, probably more than just about anybody else these days, is a thing called frame control. You guys familiar with this idea? Yes? Nods? If you don't nod, I'm going to explain it in great detail. Do you guys know what frame control is? Some people yes, some people no. OK. Frame control is this. Basically, the facts of the situation only matter when looked at through a particular context. OK? The example they give in NLP is this. They say if you're driving down the street, and you see like an ambulance like blaring its siren and like cutting you off in traffic and and going ahead of you, do you get angry at the ambulance for cutting you off? Typically no, because you're like, that's what the ambulance is supposed to do. It's doing its job, right? But if you see some guy in like a bright red sports car traveling behind the ambulance cutting off traffic, you're like, that fucking asshole. A little bit maybe, right? On the other hand, if you knew that the guy in that sports car, if you happen to know that that's his wife in the ambulance and she's like in critical condition and in labor, and he wants to be there for her when he gets there, if you happen to know that, would you be like, that fucking asshole? Or would you kind of understand? Right? You'd kind of understand. So the facts of the situation can be the same, but what changes the meaning is other information you have or how you're interpreting those facts. Okay? In every conversation you have with a girl, the facts may not change, but if you change the meaning of the facts, you change the interpretation of the facts, you change everything. So again, if your frame is, I have to impress this girl, you're already fucked, right? But if your frame is, let's have a good time and let the chips fall where they may, you're in a better spot. If on the other hand, your frame is, I'm fucking awesome, we're gonna have a good time, and I'm also gonna find out who this girl is and what she's all about, now you're in maybe even a better situation, right? So the frame controls the interaction. And the very fact that you're worried about getting in state for a girl automatically assumes that you're in a bad frame. Okay? So it's this weird paradox, though. It is a very weird paradox, because state does exist. We all know that state exists. We've all had nights where we're off and we feel shitty and we feel out of state. And we've all had nights where we feel on top of the world. But at the same time, the more that we think about being out of state, the more we try and get in state, usually what happens is we get even more out of state. Right? The more you think about being in state, the more it gets worse. So the secret is two things. Number one, get the frame right. Number two, get the actions right. And I'm going to add a third to my two things. Number three, stop thinking about state. Stop thinking about it. Okay? There are certain things that are involuntary actions in the body. Right? How many people right now can control the pace of your heartbeat? Probably not. You can control it indirectly. Right? If you get more calm and relax a bit more, you can make it slow down. If you go run really fast, you can make it speed up. You can control it indirectly. But if you're thinking about the beating of your heart, unless you're thinking about it in terms of relaxation or getting anxiety or getting stressed, you can't control it directly. Now, there are some monks that train for years and years and years and who can. But for the most part, you can't. It's an involuntary function. State is, to a certain extent, an involuntary function as well. Okay? So don't try and control it directly. If you're thinking about it, you are automatically not in it. Okay? Because what is state? It's being outside of your head. Right? It's being in a state of not thinking. It's in a state of focusing outside of yourself. So as soon as you're thinking, oh shit, I'm out of state, the longer you hang on to that thought, the more you worry about that thought, the more you let yourself think that thought, the more out of state and the harder it's going to be to become in state. So instead, get a good frame, take a positive action, and don't worry about state. Okay? And don't try to like do the don't worry about state technique to get out of state, because then you're still thinking about state. Does that make sense? Just take the action and decide to be out of state. Decide it's okay. You asked the question over here about how to be in state on a date, so to speak, right? How to maintain that when you haven't been bouncing around, you can't take your 10 rejections to get in state, etc. Well, there are a couple solutions to that. Number one, if you have to, you can take 10 rejections to get in state for a date, right? It is actually doable. If you really wanted to, you could go out before your date and go do an hour of pickup before your date. And to be honest, I wouldn't think it's the worst advice in the world. Right? It wouldn't be the worst idea. What I used to do actually and this is even before I knew of the idea of state, I just kind of naturally kind of found myself doing it, is I would have a lot of phone numbers in my phone. I used to take, before I moved to Vegas where phone numbers mean nothing, I used to have a lot of phone numbers in my phone. I used to follow up with a lot of girls. And so what I would actually do is about an hour, hour and a half before a date, I would start calling up the other numbers and just talking to the girls that I had in my phone. And actually I'd start setting dates for later in the week, which does a couple different things. It's not exactly the most romantic thing anybody's ever come up with, but it does two things. Number one, it provides a lot of abundance. I'm walking into the date and I've just scheduled 3 other dates. So I'm not too worried about like, oh, I hope this date goes well. This is the last one. This is my last chance to ever get laid. That's not really on my mind. But the other thing it does is it did get me verbally warmed up, right? In fact, over a time period, I sort of had certain girls that I always knew I'd have a good conversation with. And if I talked to them, that would get me like warmed up for the date. So if you want to, you actually could do that, okay? And that's not even a bad idea. I would endorse that idea. However, here's another idea that maybe is even more important in the long run, which is you don't need to be in state for a date, okay? All you really have to be is yourself. Think about this. When the girl shows up for a date, she's just as committed as you. Do you think she needs to be in state for the date? Can you imagine the girls like going and like before the date, like actually probably some girls do this actually, but going in front of a mirror and being like, I'm good enough, I'm pretty enough, and gosh darn it, like guys like me, right? It's kind of like hard to imagine that, because most of the time girls are just like they're showing up, they're them, and because most girls didn't like formally learn game, they don't have this idea of state in their head. They don't have this idea that I must be a certain way or not be a certain way. They're just like, I'm going to meet this person and we're going to see if we like each other. And you should have that same idea as a man. Right? You shouldn't have the idea going into a date, oh my gosh, I hope I impress this girl because like if we like each other and like if I'm my absolute best self, then maybe she'll, maybe this will go somewhere. What you should kind of have instead is the idea of screening. The idea of there are 7 billion people on the planet, half of whom are girls, that if you don't hit it off with this girl, maybe that actually means that like you aren't going to hit it off with her later. Right? Think to yourself, if I have to be in state to talk to a particular girl, what's the relationship going to look like 3 months in? All right? Am I going to like wake up and like I'll set my alarm half an hour early and like get in state before she wakes up every day? I have to get in state for the morning sex. It's a little bit of a like overstated argument, but you understand what I'm saying, right? You shouldn't need to get in state if you have the right frame, if you have the right attitude. How to pull. Okay. I'll give you the quick and dirty on how to pull. And then I will say that I have lots of videos for how to pull, because that's like literally like the biggest theme of my hot seat is how to pull. So come to hot seat. But how to pull. How to pull instead of get day twos. Okay, so there's 2 aspects to that. And this gets into the technical, which is good, because usually like my speeches are extremely technical. This is actually a very inner game speech for me, so that's good. How to pull on a technical level. On a technical level, the way that you pull is you escalate the conversation, you escalate the physicality, you escalate the content, like it's about you and it's about me, and you keep moving it forward all the time that you possibly can. If she ever resists, if you try and touch a girl and she's like, no, okay, that's fine. No doesn't mean no, it just means not yet. Okay? Now again, don't get too rapey with this, but no doesn't mean no, it just means not yet. It just means no right now. Okay? So that's the first thing, is be escalating. The biggest reason why guys get day twos instead of taking girls home is that they don't try and take girls home. They just settle for phone numbers, they settle for day twos, they don't make big moves. In fact, that was my biggest issue for a really, really, really long time. Right? I was, this is gonna sound weird to guys in like modern pickup community. I think I slept with like something like between like 60 and 70 girls before I ever had actually a pull. Is that crazy? Right? I slept with something like 60 to 70 girls off of going out, getting phone numbers, going on dates, and sleeping with them on dates before I ever took a girl home same night, ever. Now, why was that? It's because 2 things. Number one, I had a model that worked. Right? I had a model of like pick up girls, I get dates, I have sex with them. I was having plenty of sex. I was even dating like multiple girls at the same time without ever pulling. So my model's working. Why would I mess with it? Right? But the other thing was that it wasn't in my reality. I didn't believe deep down that pulling was possible. I believe there were certain girls that were like down to pull, like certain girls that were like drunk and like, you know, looking for like sex that night that you could pull. But I was under this like impression that's like fool's mate. That's like, oh, they were just down, you didn't earn it, or you didn't like make that happen. So I didn't proactively try to pull. It wasn't in my reality. So the first part of pulling is to realize that pulling is possible, and realize that that's, you know, that's part of your reality. It needs to be there. Even as far out as like last year, I came to Australia, I think your summer of 2013. And there was a guy who I was winging with who was nowhere near as good as I was at game. Like every time the two of us were in set together, the girls, all their attention would be on me, right? And he'd get blown out by all these sets. He could like, was opening a really low consistency. Every single thing in our game, I did better than him, except for one thing. He was the king of the 2-minute bathroom pull. He's really good at it. And so he'd be like getting blown out, doing shitty. I'd be like, what the fuck, this guy has no game. And then he'd be walking back, yeah, just fucked your girl in the bathroom. I'm like, what the fuck? How did this happen, right? Big difference was it was in his reality. That's it. It was in his reality. So I got frustrated, like the second night that happened, I got frustrated. I was like, what the fuck? I'm gonna make this happen. I decided to go pull a girl to the bathroom in 2 minutes. And basically, I pulled her almost to the bathroom in 5, got a little clunky in terms of like the actual mechanics of getting her in there. But from then on, and with a little bit of work, I can now do that in my game, right? What actually changed? Did I get better at game? Maybe, you could say that belief made me better at game, but mostly, it's just I changed what I thought was possible. I changed what I believed, and so that made it possible, right? So you need to believe, if you want to pull, you need to believe that pulling is possible. You need to believe that girls want to go home with you. You need to believe that. Secondly, you need to escalate in such a way that you make it possible. You need to escalate in such a way that you don't bring up a lot of their objections. If all you're doing is pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to get physical with a girl, she's going to not like it, right? She's going to be, oh, this is too fast. All you want me for is sex. This is not genuine. You don't really like me. This is moving too fast, etc., right? So what you can do in that context is avoid all those objections. Usually the way I do it is by giving them first. So what I do, we talked about frame control again. We'll bring that theme up. What is the frame? Instead of the frame being that I'm the guy trying for sex and you're the girl resisting, the frame you would like to have is I'm the fun guy who's just hanging out, and I like getting physical with you because it's fun, but I don't want this to necessarily go anywhere, right? I don't want any, I think it's either Ryan or Alex that came up with this. It says, I don't want anything written in blood, right? I don't want anything written in blood. I don't want it to be like just because we hang out all night that like, we feel obligated to sleep with each other or whatever. I just want to have a good time. So you want to change the frame. That's absolutely critical, all right? The frame can't be that if you have sex, you win and she loses. If that's the case, you are fucked. Not literally, but figuratively, okay? You can't have that frame. It has to be a win, right? The way that you pull is escalate and structure the night in such a way that when she goes home with you, it's a win. And when she sleeps with you, it's a win, right? If she wins by sleeping with you, she'll sleep with you. If she loses by sleeping with you, she usually won't, right? An interesting proof of this is what happens if I tell girls what I do for a living early on in an interaction. Right? If I tell a girl I am a pickup coach, all of a sudden they will want to hang out with me, they'll think it's fascinating, they want to see all my videos, and they will never in a million years want to sleep with me. Why? Right? They can think I'm amazing. They can want to introduce me to all their friends. They can brag about me, but they won't want to sleep with me because within the frame of pickup artist, right? If I have sex with them, they lost and I won. Make sense? They were the next girl that like succumbed to my pickup techniques, right? However, interestingly enough, if I just end up sleeping with girls and then we get into like what I do afterwards, literally 100%, not 99%, 100% of the time, they're like cool with it and think it's cool what I do. But only if, and then they've already slept with me, but they slept with me when it was a win for them, right? And then they view the sleeping with me as a win, and they also view me keeping them around as a big win. Because now it's the guy that could have anyone is with me, right? So now it's a win. So it's all in the framing. It's how you frame it, right? So how do I frame things? Whenever I'm going to take a girl home, instead of saying, let's get out of here and go to this place, I say, actually, there's this place I'd like to take you, but, I just met you. I don't know you that well. Maybe we should take it. Actually, never mind. Forget I even brought it up. Right? It's like, no, what is it? Oh, no, it's okay. I'll tell you later. I'm going there with friends. It's kind of our place. I don't know you that well, never mind, right? And now all of a sudden she's chasing, but now all of a sudden going to that place is a win, right? It's framed as a win instead of as a loss. And let's be clear, just framing it as a win in and of itself doesn't work, right? If she doesn't like you, it's also not a win for another reason, I guess, right? If she doesn't like you, she's not going anyway. But if she really likes you and you can phrase it in such a way that she wins and has a great night and can like put the experience within a good frame, that's gonna make everything better. If she likes you, but the experience is framed in a bad way, she'll continue liking you and not sleeping with you or not going home with you. And that's what a lot of guys get. That's what most guys get, is that resistance of no, we can't because X, Y, Z. The other big thing in terms of frame is this idea of the lover versus the provider. Okay, a lot of times if a girl wants to do phone numbers and go on dates with you, it's because you're in the provider role. It's because you're the guy that she sees in that context. The other guy that she sees will be the guy who she like looks at and is like, I just want to fuck that guy, I don't care. Okay, and that's again in how you convey yourself. So if you start trying to impress a girl by saying, yeah, I have a good stable job, I make this kind of income, I have these future goals, I want to have a picket fence and 2.2 children and whatever. Provider. Yeah, exactly. That's very, very, very provider, right? On the other hand, throughout the interaction I have with girls, I'm constantly bringing up frames of lover, not provider. Okay, so I'll say things like, you know what, let's just keep this, keep this fun and let the grown-ups handle the serious stuff. That's not a provider frame at all. Right? Or I'll say things like, you know what, I want to get to know you, but I actually don't want to know any of the facts of your life. Like, I think that's, not that I think you're boring, I just think that's a boring conversation. I'd much rather hear about like some crazy experiences you've had. Right? That's more in the like the lover frame. Let's have an experience together, let's do something fun, instead of let's compare resumes and ask if our parents would like each other's parents. Right? Again, lover versus provider. So the more that you have that frame, the better off you are. I think that really brought that one home to me was a lot of times I'd be with girls and I'd be about to take them home and they're really into me, and then I'd say something that's a little too impressive. Like I'd mention that like I'm an entrepreneur, right? And like that I travel around the world and I give these speeches. I'd be like, oh, that's really cool. We should go on a date sometime. I'm like, yeah, we're just getting a taxi. No, take my number, we'll go on a date. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like I told you something cool and now you don't want to have sex with me because of it? You're like, no, that's fascinating. What you told me is really, really cool. We should definitely go on a date now. I'm like, what the fuck? All right, why? Because I switched over. I switched over in her mind from lover mode to provider mode. And so now, instead of thinking, oh my God, I want to have this fun experience with this hot guy, now all of a sudden she's thinking, oh my God, I better not be slutty and ruin it with this guy who like I could have a future with. Now, if you do legitimately want to date a girl and like make her your girlfriend and stuff like that, it doesn't hurt that much, I suppose, to go a little bit in the provider frame. But it's always easier to switch from the lover frame to the provider instead of provider to lover. So even in that context, I like to keep it in the lover frame. It's a lot easier to convince a girl that you have a solid life and you could have a lot of fun time spending time together after having sex with her than it is to like have a girl be like your best friend and like think about a future with you and then decide like, oh, we're gonna go have sex now, right? Because a lot of times they'll try and make you hold out or other things like that. Also, a lot of, this is just my own personal theory, but I think it's borne out by my experience, a lot of how the relationship unfolds will still be dictated by how it started, right? Relationships are based on precedent. Relationships are based on like, if you've been friends with someone for like 10 years and you always do the same activity together, if all of a sudden he's like, I don't want to do that activity with you anymore. Like, you know what, I don't like, if you have a friend you like go to basketball or go to football games with or whatever, right? And he's like, you know what, I don't want to go to the football games with you anymore. No, I think we should like go have wine together now instead. You'd be like, what the fuck? Like, what is this? Like, we don't even have the same relationship anymore, right? So if you start out the relationship in the frame of provider, she's going to expect you to be like all the other guys that are in that provider frame. She's going to expect you to date only her. She's going to expect you to go meet her friends and her family early on in the relationship. She's going to expect you to spend the holidays together. She's going to expect you to, I don't know, when you get like, she'd expect you to like get promotions at work instead of like going out on your own and doing some entrepreneurial thing. She's going to expect you to fit into those sorts of frames that the provider type male usually fits into, right? Whereas if you start off in that lover frame, that adventurous crazy frame, and then you bring up more crazy stuff, she's going to be more open to it. So even if you could get a girl through the provider frame, if the relationship type you want with her is more of the lover frame, you're shooting yourself in the foot in that way as well. So that's a very, very important thing, right? And the more you're playing the provider role, the more often she's gonna be like, take my number, take me on a date. The more you're playing the crazy, like, let's go do something now lover role, the more often you're gonna get that one night stand. So that's another key frame as well.